You guys know that this is true. I polled you guys on my page to ask you what you thought made labor worse or more painful. And 36% of you, that's the majority, said it is anxiety about upcoming birth. A lot of you are anxious about your upcoming birth, and I feel like I'm not doing my job. So today we're going to talk about that anxiety, where it comes from, and what you can do about it. And after 20 years in labor and delivery, I'm here to say that anxiety isn't just in your head. You're not just imagining that you're going to be anxious in labor. This type of anxiety actually shuts off the oxytocin hormone. So you'll be in labor, but because you have that anxiety, your body no longer feels safe and the oxytocin shuts off. I actually just filmed a whole video on oxytocin and how to increase it in labor. I'll link it down below. When you have this anxiety, it leads to a slower labor, possibly more interventions because of that slower labor. They need to speed things along, and possibly even more pain. And nobody wants that. There is a fear, tension, pain cycle to where the fear just adds to that pain, which makes it even worse in labor. And your body and Mother Nature are doing enough to you in labor. You don't need to compound it. I know you've felt it before. When you're in an anxious situation, you're at a math test that is just way harder than you know. Does your body tense up? It totally does. But in labor, you actually have to relax to let things go. And so you don't want that anxiety hanging on. This is why two women who have pretty similar labors, they just go into labor and they have their baby, can have two very different labor experience. And this is something that I've seen in my thousands of patients in labor and delivery. And the single biggest thing that is going to help break this anxiety cycle is to know what to expect before you get into the hospital. And that is exactly why I created the online prenatal class for couples, to help you know what to expect, to eliminate the anxiety in the labor room. I'm going to link that class down below. Okay, so where does labor anxiety come from? The first off, like we talked about before, not knowing what's going to happen. The hospital is a different place and you have to know how to manage it. It's almost like going to a foreign country. And instead of every sensation, understanding that this is part of labor or how things go in the hospital, your mind starts to make up that something is wrong. And then on top of that, we ask you questions. We want to know what you want. Now, this is where a birth plan comes in handy. I actually have a whole free birth plan series that you can go through to think about a lot of these questions ahead of time. Like, would you like an induction or are you anti-induction? Where do you stand on those different things? I'm going to put that free birth class series down in the description. But understanding the choices that might come to you when you're in labor can really help so that you're not caught off guard every time we're asking you about different things. And most of all, you're not just on the whatever train and then you feel like your provider managed your delivery instead of you. So knowing those questions ahead of time can really help out. And a lot of you know those questions, but then you've got that partner sitting over there and their anxiety is going to start to whirlwind up because they have no idea what's going on and it is going to creep over like the blob onto you and can start to make you anxious as well. So making sure that your partner is also involved in the preparation is going to help out a lot. In fact, if you start to get anxious, but then you see your partner is cool as a cucumber, it's going to help your anxiety come down as well. But you got to get prepared. These people are not prepared in high school. They need a little bit of help to get prepared. So do you. And I think a lot of you think just getting prepared puts you like you have to labor a certain way. And that's not the case at all. Getting prepared actually just helps you know the different options depending on how your labor goes. It's like, did you read those Choose Your Own Adventure books when you were a kid? It's just like knowing those options ahead of time and so you're not caught off guard where you're picking if you're going to page 68 with the rusty pirate or if you're going to page 32 following the shaggy dog, right? So what actually helps with all of this anxiety? Knowledge is the number one key to reduce anxiety. It's not relaxation apps and it's not breathing apps because it is going to decrease that anxiety and then it's going to decrease your pain that you can more adequately breathe through. I'm not here to say that a good birth class isn't going to teach you relaxation techniques because I think that's super important. The online prenatal class for couples does just that. But they're not all you need. You got to combat it with a little bit of knowledge about what's going to go on in the hospital as well. Knowing what to expect at each stage so nothing surprises you. In labor and delivery, it is not unusual for 5 nurses to come running in your room, turn up your IV, rotate your position, possibly ask to check your cervix. All of that is very normal. Now, if that happened on med surg, that 5 nurses came running in the room, you're likely dying. But in labor and delivery, it's just different. So if you take a class from somebody who knows those different things, oh, this is where they come in, they turn up my IV, they rotate me, we might want to check my cervix. This is very normal. Versus You didn't know that was going to happen, and all those nurses run in the room and you're freaking out inside. As you can imagine, that could be a very anxious thing. Knowing options in advance so you're not caught off guard by the questions that we're going to ask you. Having a partner who's actually prepared. They're not just like a cheerleader over in the corner thumbing TikToks telling you, way to go. They're actually engaged and wanting to help you out. They're a teammate for you. Learning to relax into these different sensations. And that's something that breathing can really help rather than fight it. You got to remember that breathing and relaxation are tools, but they are not magic fixes for all of the things that you're going to experience during labor. And as a note, we're not going to eliminate all of the anxiety walking into the labor room. When you leave the hospital, it is likely that your life is going to be very different than when you went into the hospital. I always say that it's like a wedding and a major medical event combined into one giant long day, right? Life is going to change once you have this baby. And so there is going to be some anxiety with this situation, but there's a big difference between productive anxiety of like, am I prepared? Do I have my pads? Do I have the things I need for baby versus unproductive anxiety, which just looks like your brain freaking out, running around with like a chicken with your head cut off, right? Now, there are a lot of tactics people use to try and avoid this anxiety situation. And number one is avoiding anything they don't want to learn about. So many people do not want to watch any information about C-sections, possibly even epidurals or inductions, or heavens to Betsy, nobody wants to learn anything about an episiotomy, which I totally get. It's not something I want to dwell on as well, but just learning a little bit of information about all these different things can really help you feel more prepared rather than like an ostrich with your head in your sand and you just ignored it. Ignorance in this situation is not bliss. Ignorance is anxiety, and we don't want that. Some of you may only want to watch all these positive birth stories, and a lot of times those birth stories skip a lot of things. I hear them on the phone call with their sister after they have their baby, and they tell them it was so magical and they didn't have any pain at all, and me full well knowing that an hour ago they were miserable and dying during labor. And it's just going to ruin your expectations for labor. You have to have appropriate expectations for what labor is going to be like for you. And you got to learn those expectations from an expert. So just watching positive or honestly negative birth stories are going to hype up that anxiety even more. Sometimes I think birth stories are not all that helpful. Real full-blown education is probably your best bet. And a lot of people just ignore it. They think they'll get to a birth class, when they have time. The good news, the online prenatal class for couples can be done in just a few hours. Even if you're due very, very soon, even if you've started into early labor, you could probably still finish the birth class before you finish labor. So it is possible to get prepared, but the more time you have to marinate on this information, the better it is. So I always recommend starting your birth class at about 34 weeks of pregnancy, having it done by about 36 weeks of pregnancy. But again, if that's not you, you're past 36 weeks of pregnancy, you can still get it done now. Not a big deal at all. The crazy thing is in my survey of what increases your pain during labor, anxiety is the most fixable of it because learning some simple knowledge can really help. But it was still the number one thing that people thought would increase their pain during labor. Now, preparation is not going to guarantee a perfect birth. There's plenty of people who prepare and still end up having a C-section, but they're prepared for the C-section instead of being traumatized by it. And if you're one of those people who loves to know which aisle their wood is in Home Depot before they go in, I have the birth class for you. Getting prepared has never been easier. I'll link that class down below. Okay, we've talked a lot about anxiety, but how do you mentally prepare for going into labor? I have a whole video on some confidence hacks that you guys can watch. I'm gonna link it up above and down below. But thank you for joining us here on The Pregnancy Nurse, where we get you prepared, not scared for your upcoming hospital birth, and definitely not anxious.